Hello, and welcome to episode 13of CMYKC. While 13 is typically an unlucky number, it was actually really lucky for us because we finally had a chance to sit down with Justin Watkins of Native. It was just Chris and I for this week's episode, but we had a lot of fun talking with him about the recent evolution of Native, from an online interviewing platform to his latest business venture. Just kind of tell us about who you are, what you do, and maybe how you got started with everything that is Justin.
Okay, well, a lot of that has changed over the past couple months. For the past 10 years, I've been the vice president of creative at MMGY, or at least had a role at MMGY. The past 3 to 4 years, I've been in a management role of creative director type thing, and again, I was a VP of creative. So essentially just helping shape that team and run that department. It's been a great job. About a month or so ago, I decided to make a change, and I felt like 10 years was a good run. And I'm going to change it up a little bit. So what I ended up doing is I became a partner with a search marketing firm in St. Louis. At the same time, I turned Native into what was an interview project, continuing the interview project, but now it's going to be a business that I'm starting around basically building a content studio. So, and then doing consulting work just to pay the bills as I get that off the ground. Mm-hmm. So that's really my big push, is understanding how I can partner with Evolve in St. Louis, how I can help them out, and then also how I can turn Native into a functioning business that actually pays the bills.
So is it just Native now?
Yeah, so Native has always been kind of the name, and it's funny because a lot of people ask about the name of what Native really means. I think a lot of people it means we're from Kansas City, mm-hmm. right? It kind of means a lot of things to me, the word Native. So originally the reason I liked it so much was I was obsessed with the term digital native. So I just thought it was interesting to see people who are native to the digital world and people who weren't, mm-hmm. and some people who probably never will be, and other people who have sort of taught themselves and sort of immigrated to the digital world. Okay. And so that's where the name became an obsession with mine. And then I started thinking about all the different words that native means. So like in computing, it's native to a platform. Anyway, the long story short, I like Native because it talks about, it's something that's critical and core to the component of something. It's you're of something, not necessarily from something. So for me, you could have just moved here from Chicago. What I like about it is you still make up the fabric of what Kansas City is, mm-hmm. and I want to know what that fabric looks like. And so I talk to people, right? And so the reason why I wanted to keep that name for my business, one, I like the name, but also I want to make sure that my company, as we get to know clients better, we become a core part of how they operate as well. Mm-hmm. So that's like the intention, is to get to know them so well that they trust us, and that the work we do, it just feels like it's an extension of them.
Sure.
Yeah.
So how will that kind of translate now that you have a partner in St. Louis?
Yeah, so the funny thing about, so I'm building a content studio, and the real goal there is to build a creative team of people who create really good stories, whether it's written or it's photography or it's video, right? Like that's mm-hmm. the prize, is to rebuild a new creative team. I love building creative teams. Mm-hmm. To do that, I don't want to do it with just a bunch of creative teams. I want us to also be very analytical and strategic, because that will help justify the great stories that we're telling, right? So I've got a lot of emphasis in building that strategy out, and part of that is going to be partnering with agencies like Evolve to help understand how you're getting in front of people, how you're acquiring that, how you can build out the customer journey, how you can look at outcomes and solutions in the products. And you really need both. It's kind of like the yin and yang to make everything work. Right. And I don't want to be a one-sided company. I want to be a dual-focused company.
Cool. So kind of backing up some, how did Native really get off the ground? What was your inspiration? Obviously we're in a cool city that is doing really cool things, but how did you decide, I want to interview people, and then land on your format, even just one person?
Yeah, I actually put out a video last week and relaunched my website that talks about that exact thing. I did it kind of quietly, so maybe people can see it whenever this thing comes out. But the way it came to me was, I called the video Native, or a notebook to Native. So the point of it was, I have, and everybody has, notebooks full of ideas. Right. You write it down and you think this would be a cool thing to do, and then the next day you have another idea and you forget the one before. And I kind of got to the point where I had notebooks full of ideas. I hadn't done anything on them, and I was getting really frustrated with myself for having all these ideas and executing on none of them, right? So about that time, I had this idea that wouldn't it be cool if someone did a Q&A format, because I love Q&A formats, but it had just focused on Kansas City because I was tired of reading about people in Austin or Brooklyn or wherever, right? So I wrote down how someone would go about doing that, and then when I got done with it, I thought, who would do this? And I couldn't really think of anybody more qualified, and I thought, well, technically I could do this. I could be the person that does this. And I don't know, it just kind of came to a point where like, this is a good idea, I don't want to give up on it, I'm going to make myself do it. And I tricked myself into it. Like I had to trick myself into it. By two ways. One is I told other people and made myself accountable. And then I put money on the line because I'm a very frugal type person. And so if I get money involved, like I'm going to make sure like that's invested well. I don't want to just like see it float away. So I told some friends what I was going to do. They thought it was a good idea. Actually paid some friends to build the site, even though I could have built the site myself. I did it because I knew if I paid for it, I would absolutely do something with it. What I didn't expect was they built it in like a week. So they're like, hey, it's done. I'm like, crap. Now I gotta like start interviewing people. So I started with a few friends, and it seemed like it was a cool format. And then I asked them who I should talk to, and I really expected. I didn't expect people to say yes very often. I was thinking that for every 10, invites, I would get like 3 yeses.
Right.
But I was getting like 10 out of 10. Like everybody was willing to help out. So that was really surprising. And then once I sort of landed on the format and people, said that they, showed that they liked it, I felt like, well, I got to keep it going. And then I just kind of kept it going, And but probably within a month, I had figured out, I'm going to ask 5 questions. I like this last question about epiphanies. I'm going to always ask that one. I'm going to do black and white because whatever kind of photo they send me, I can kind of doctor it, make it look consistent. I'll use Google Docs to help collaborate on the questions and the answers, and I'll do it on a weekly basis, and that kind of just sort of fell into place. And so for me, it's like the least amount of effort I can put into something that seems like worth looking at, right? Because I didn't want to bite off something and then really struggle and hate the fact that I was pouring so much time into it. Like this is a manageable amount for one person to do. And so that's really made a lot of the difference for me, is that I can keep it going, and I can keep doing it on a weekly basis.
Cool. So like in regards to kind of the visual direction of your site, that was one of the things that I noticed right away was kind of the fun colors on your homepage and how the image shifts every time you visit the page. So was that you, or was that something that you let your friends control when they were building the site?
Well, in my mind, I thought that the interview itself was really the most important thing, because I saw a lot of people probably clicking a link off of Twitter, reading the article, done. There's nothing else for them to do unless they wanted to look at other interviews, right? So on the homepage, the reason if you looked at the old site now, all the imagery on the homepage was pretty goofy, really. If you remember, it's like colorful and his
pig with the top hat.
Right, yeah. A dog riding a horse. Is mostly just because this is a fun project and I wanted to have fun with it. And if it's not fun, then I'm not going to do it. And so I just wanted people to, I don't know, learn a little something about people in town and what they're doing. But then if they go to the homepage, then why not have fun with it?
So for people that you plan on interviewing moving forward, do you imagine those being A, still Kansas City kind of based people, and then B, are they going to be like clients? Do you want to get them involved, or is it still going to be kind of just not random, but just kind of?
No, I don't think I don't really want to change anything with interviews. It works for me right now, and I think it works for the audience. I think it does exactly what it's intended to do, which is introduce or reintroduce people to others in town. One of the coolest things is, well, personally, just being able to talk to some people who I may have not met otherwise, right? But it's also really rewarding and interesting whenever someone I do know says, you covered this person. I totally forgot they do this in town. I need to give them a call. Or someone will say, hey, can you give me their contact information? What they offer is exactly what I'm looking for. And so it's really rewarding to be like that matchmaker or that connector, or like reintroduce people. So I just want to keep doing that.
Awesome. Who have been some of your favorite people that you've interviewed so far?
Well, I haven't had any bad ones, thankfully. And my favorites are always favorites for odd reasons. Like, I interviewed you, and I loved your responses because they just felt more like playful than a lot of others, you know? One of my first interviews I really liked was Daniel Goggin from Hint. And he had a different soundtrack or a different music track for every single answer he had.
That's awesome.
And so I liked that he was messing with the medium, you know, like right away. In general, the ones I like the most are the ones who are more open and honest and kind of type like they talk. Because it's just more revealing to understand like what their struggle was or what it was that kind of, you know, prompted them to do this, or maybe talk about one of the breaks that they had to help them lead to some of the successes they've had. So,
other than the surprise of people just responding kind of in general, have you been surprised by any responses, or have there been any kind of like weird answers that you've gotten for things that you weren't really expecting?
No, I mean, again, just how helpful everybody has been the most surprising thing. I mean, I'm talking to almost everybody I talk to. They're very busy people, right? And that's one of the reasons why I got it down to 5 questions.
Right.
I don't want to take up a lot of their time. They're sort of doing me a favor by, you know, giving me their valuable time. And people are really helpful, and they're really helpful to help introduce you to other people. And then as you talk to them, you find out that other people have been helpful to them. You know, almost everybody, man, there's been so many people I've talked to, and they say, you know, I started this company, and within the first month, so-and-so who I never knew was introduced to me. They told me this, and that was the thing that really helped me get going, or something like that. So it's a theme that I've stumbled upon, is that when you kind of put yourself out there and just ask, like, people will step up and be helpful.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just a Kansas City thing. Like, for a while, I'm like, man, we're just really nice here in Kansas City, just helping people. I think that's just a people thing. I think people like to be helpful, you know? So if you give them an opportunity to easily do that, then they will.
Right. Backing up some, you said that you had the ability to build the site yourself. So, like, where did you go to school? What is more of your background, like, pre-MMGY? Like, where did you start?
Let's see if I can do a real quick, like, full story on that. I went to Central Missouri in Warrensburg. I was a graphic art student. Most of their program is mostly print production, which I really didn't understand. I was just the kid that drew all the time when he was a kid, and I just figured I needed to go in a program like this, say graphic art, so it sounded right. They had a couple web design classes. I took every single one they had, and I got an internship in Sedalia, Missouri, which doesn't seem like a hotbed for interactive work. No. But there's a shop called 305 Spin. They're still going strong today. And they've always had about 4 or 5 employees, and he's always done really well at recruiting good talent there. And I got access to the top guy and worked there for 2 years, and he taught me. I mean, I learned so much there. It floated me for the next 5 years or so. So that I learned a ton right there. The timing was perfect because that was during the first .com bust. And so a lot of shops in Kansas City were laying off people and calling them up and saying, hey, are you guys still in business?
Wow.
Can you hire me? And he's like, no, we're doing great. So I had a job during that thing where a lot of people were kind of struggling. I went to St. Louis briefly after that. That didn't work out, and I left. Well, I just didn't enjoy it. And I had an offer to come back to Kansas City and work at Salvo Rennick, but I also had an offer to come back to Central and teach classes. Those classes I knew could be better when I was taking them, and since I was kind of a critic of it while I was there, I thought I kind of have to go back and teach since they're asking me to do this, and I was a critic. Like, I got to put my money where my mouth is. So I went back and I just did everything. I worked remotely for a while. I took grad school classes. I taught classes. It was a really busy time. Yeah. But it was really fun. Teaching is a ton of fun. And then when I finished up there, I went to work at Salvo Rennick and stayed there for about 2 years. And that was a really great agency, great people to work for. Had a really fun team of about 13 people at the time. And then I moved over here to MMGY, and 10 years working for the travel industry, which is partially one of the reasons why I lasted so long. Is travel is a great industry to work on. I mean, every night you can go home and sleep well knowing that you did something. You basically promoted something that's positive for people. Traveling is a good thing, right? You know, and it's fun work, cool photo shoots, and good clients.
How often did you get to travel for MMGY?
At the beginning, it was just a few trips a year, but then as your responsibilities grow, your traveling grows, and I think last year I took 15 trips, which is not a lot, but it's a good amount.
Yeah. Where's one of your favorite destinations?
Oh man, well, I've never taken a bad trip with MMGY, because if you're going to visit, let's just say, a destination, if you're doing a fam tour or familiarization tour, they want to show you the best things in that destination. So it's essentially a week vacation where they just stuff you full of food and show you all the best attractions.
That's awesome.
And that's called work. So fam tours are great. I really don't think I've taken a bad trip. So
Dang.
It's hard to say what the best one is. Some of them have been pretty. There's a few people here who have taken some baller trips. So.
Like Vegas, high roller.
Well, there was one year where I went to Vegas like 8 times in a year because
wow.
I did the site for Mandalay Bay and went down for usability testing, went down for fam tours, went down for photo shoots, video shoots. That was a really cool project. I'm not a huge fan of Vegas, but I sort of became a bit of a fan of Vegas.
Yeah.
And it's also cool to see like the underworld of Vegas and the behind the scenes and all the kind of access a normal person would never get to see.
Sure.
So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. So how much longer are you at MMGY?
I don't know, actually. I'm in a consulting role at this point.
Gotcha.
And we'll see.
Yeah.
It's hard to walk away from this company completely, and it's mutually beneficial for me to stick around and work in some small capacity. So I'll do that as long as it makes sense for both of us.
Nice. With the partnership that you now have in St. Louis, I mean, that's for Native, right?
Both. It's mutually beneficial. Okay. So I am in St. Louis once or twice a month. I bring something different to their company than what they have. They are a company full of analytical thinkers, and they are search first marketers, and they really have a unique structure to the way they approach it. And I really believe in what they're doing, and I think they know that if they can add in a few other pieces that maybe they don't have as far as skill sets go, then that can help them take them to the next level. And so I sort of represent that more creative marketing side. Also just kind of leadership side, who can help them kind of step up. For me, with Native, again, it brings some of the really heavy hitter, like analytical thinkers to the table to help go along with kind of the creative crew that I'm starting to develop. Right. This roster of creative talent I'm starting to build out.
Yeah.
So it really goes hand in hand. If you're creating good content, you got to have a way to be able to bring people to that.
Sure.
Search is a big part of that. And so it kind of plays in well. So there'll be some of my clients who are going to need their services, and there's already some of their clients that need my services as well with Native.
So where's the balance at right now in terms of like you kind of almost being like the puppeteer and kind of orchestrating everything versus doing creative work yourself?
For which gig?
Okay, so it changes.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
So it's fairly even, like. I mean, I guess I'm talking more for like Native, like where.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm not the puppet. I'm the puppeteer, I guess is what you'd say. My past month or so with Native has been creating a framework for the services that we'll offer, which are content strategy, which is very analytical, content creation, the creative part, and then user experience, which is essentially building a website to house all of those things.
Right. And
that's a blend of the two. All three of those are things that I could personally do myself, but I'm not trying to create a job for myself. I'm trying to create a business.
Sure.
And so I am trying to build a support system and people who are honestly better than me at all of those specific things to where I can bring all those pieces together. So when a client says we have this problem, my role is to kind of orchestrate how that gets done by all these people who are very specialized in those areas.
Right.
So if we need a killer writer, an illustrator who kind of works with this type of aesthetic, and a videographer whose style kind of matches with that, then my role is to kind of create a framework for how all those work together, make sure that it's on point and it all kind of jives for the client.
So you're doing very minimal creative work.
Yeah. It would be easy for me to get in and do those types of things.
Sure.
And initially you could make more money doing that initially if you didn't have to pay other people to do it.
Sure.
But it doesn't really set you on a path to grow a business that scales in any sort of way. And that is my intention. My intention isn't to create a fun job for me to create a bunch of work. My intention is to create a group of people who really enjoy what they do. And I don't want to design work, I want to design a team.
Gotcha.
And then that team can design that great work. And so that's my reward. And I had to really think about that whenever I was thinking about stepping away from MMGY. The job I left at MMGY, it's a great job. It's a really good job. It'd be very difficult for me to find a job that I thought was as good as that in Kansas City. So I really had to think hard, why am I willing to leave this job? And it's not financial. For me, it's really about, the thing I enjoy more than anything is building a team, and I was able to do that at MMGY.
Right.
But I want to see how far I can take that. Like if I have all decisions are mine, can I do that even better, right?
Sure.
And I think it'd be great if Kansas City had another place for a creative talent to work. I think there's definitely people I work with who have felt limited in their options.
Right.
And so if in 5 years I have another one of those small shops where it's a fun place to work and you can do work, then that's the reward.
Yeah.
So that's my intention, is to start from the get-go of build that group.
Right. And it doesn't really seem like you miss the creative side as much.
Well, ironically,
designing?
because when you start your own thing, you have to do everything.
Right.
Right. So I'm actually doing more design work in the past month or two than I have in the past couple of years.
Nice.
So dusting the cobwebs off there and doing a little bit more design work. Whenever I became a creative director and started to step away from the design work, I had a lot of friends that said, "Do you miss the design work?" And I never really did. Which is kind of surprising. I figured after a period of time I would, but to me, I'm not sure that design was ever my strength necessarily. It was just, design is essentially just solving problems, right? You have this abstract problem, you're trying to solve it through visual, right? Visual language. I just like solving puzzles, So the puzzles just took different shapes.
Yeah.
And it's rewarding whenever you see the outcomes of that. And so when you start moving into designing teams, instead of looking at a design comp and thinking, I like the way this looks right now, and I'll not hate it for at least 3 more months, you look at your team, and if the team is doing good work, and they're happy, and they're smiling, they're glad that they work here, you don't hate that after 3 months. You love it.
Right.
There's headaches that come along with it, but it's rewarding. So
I guess I'm fascinated by that primarily because I don't think I could ever make that jump. Like I very much am in the design business for design, and I have thought about starting my own business before, and that kind of thinking makes me panic a little bit. Like I don't have.
And there's nothing wrong with it. And I think it's important to understand that I think that there's 3 types of jobs you can basically have, right? So the one is a specialist, which would be a designer, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can do that till you're in old age. And you could be a really great designer, especially if you stick with it that long. Like, you're going to be really great. The other job is a manager, and that's what a lot of people, when they hit a certain year of experience, they become a manager,
right.
And they leave that specialization, which for a lot of people, they don't realize they actually didn't want to leave that.
Yeah.
They just think, well, I get more money and I can do this, so I have to, right? A lot of people, I think, do end up in management. They don't know that they intentionally went there. They just ended up there, right? So that's sort of been the past 4 or 5 years for me is management. And then the third one is entrepreneurial, and that isn't managing something. It's seeing something that doesn't exist and growing. That's very different than being a manager, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And so I've never done that, and that's what I think is the next step.
Cool.
is try the entrepreneurial. So I think it's important to understand those 3 steps and know like which one you want to be in at this moment, because there's nothing wrong with all 3, but you kind of need to know what you're walking into. Yeah,
it was interesting. A friend of mine who actually works at MMGY now, her name is Nicole. I don't know if you've interacted with her, but she sent me this article about kind of getting promoted above your means, kind of like it's how terrible bosses are born. Like, people just accept these roles because they've been in the job for 10 years, and then they get offered the position, and without thinking, they're like, yeah, that's for me. And then they don't even realize that it was a mistake to make that jump. Like, people don't have those skills.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think a lot of people do get promoted just because they've done this for 10 years, let's just put them in there, or they've been doing this for long enough, let's put them in there. The problem is if it doesn't work, a lot of people don't get taken out of that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
I actually am a big believer in always going beyond your means, because you'll never know where your limit is until you go past it.
Right.
And then if you can backfill and figure it out, then that works. Whenever I became a manager for the first time, I was scared to death. I mean, I was really scared to death. The first thing I did was I went to the library and I checked out 5 or 10 books on management.
Yeah.
Like Good to Great, all these like really boring management books, and I just mowed through them. And the good part of that was it actually really ramped up my reading habit, because before I was real big into reading articles.
Yeah.
Whenever I went on that kick of reading management books, I never stopped. I just kept mowing through all these different books. So that was a benefit, but it really made me think about it, and I did it because I was scared.
Right.
I was scared because I was managing people who were my friends and people my same age. Some people had more experience than me.
Yeah.
And I think it ended up helping. The fact that I was scared, I think actually ended up helping.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, it's definitely good to push yourself. Just finding the spot where you're comfortable, or being able to get back out of it if it doesn't work out.
Now, see, that's the other thing. Again, one of the reasons why I lasted here for 10 years is because this company was really good at giving you plenty of rope. Like, all I ever wanted was to work at a place where they gave me enough rope where I could hang myself and just see how far I could go, right?
Sure.
And can I go into this presentation and give a pitch that wins, or can I manage a team and they don't all hate the place and quit? Can I do these things? I don't know. And I was given opportunities to give it a shot, and they always found a way to kind of make it work, and then they'd give me another challenge. Yeah. So if you can find a place like that, that's basically what we're all working for, I think, if you're that type of person.
Yeah, finding that place is definitely challenging, unfortunately. Like, you would think that people would make a little more of an effort to make sure that the right people get to the right jobs and such.
Yeah, I think it's a two-way thing. The employers have to be open to it, but you have to show that you want it. You can't wait for them to say, all right, we're going to give you a shot. I think you have to do the job that you want before it's your job.
Sure.
And I've looked at people who've worked on my team before, and you can easily see people who say, I want this job, but they're not really doing anything to show you that they can do it. Right. And then there's other people who they've been doing that job they want for 2 years, really. They just took it upon themselves to do that role. And so when they get promoted, everybody's like, well, yeah, of course. Like, they were already doing that,
Yeah.
And it's easy for them.
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, where did you grow up?
Well, I'm not native to Kansas City. I grew up in Trenton, Missouri, which is a small north central Missouri town.
So why Kansas City? Like, you've made your career base here for the most part. Why do you
Not as many ad agencies in Trenton, Missouri.
Yeah, that's very true.
Kansas City was always the closest town to Trenton, so Kansas City always feels like home to people there. I gave St. Louis a shot. Wasn't for me, although I'm there a lot more frequently. But
right.
No, I love Kansas City. I think it's a great place to raise a family and live.
Yeah.
I'm pretty committed to Kansas City.
Yeah. So, like, with your family, how do you kind of balance work and life? Carefully.
I'm trying to, because I'm early in this new phase. Right. I'm trying to set good boundaries and making sure that I'm not working around the clock, because that would burn me out and also make me a terrible dad and husband. So I just sort of have a couple rules that I follow of don't work in these hours and don't work in these scenarios. Like, if the kids are home and it's between this time, then I'm not working, right? And I'm sticking to that. Yeah. So it's all working so far. Well, I want to know more about how you guys got this started, because I don't know have you ever covered that topic on this show before?
We haven't really.
I think this would be a perfect time to hear more. I think people who listen to this want to know.
Okay, well, we Steve, Chris, and I all met through Coffee and Design. We had found out about the Slack channel that Coffee and Design had instigated, that's a word, just checking. And so through Slack, we had all kind of started talking about design and things in general, and they then had a Design on Tap event where we met in person for like the first time, and we just had a lot of fun, had a couple drinks. Steve announces, does anyone want to start a podcast? And, Chris and I were interested. We started talking more about it, and we just kind of ran with it. So we just, like, Steve kept having doubts and, who's going to listen to us? What if no one wants to be on the show? And I kind of pushed him, like, you won't know until we try. And even if we only interview the 3 of us, we already have 3 interviews. So that'll at least get us off the ground. And if no one likes us, if we're not having fun with it at that point, we can stop. But
Are you guys more confident when you ask people to join your show or when you meet them for the first time now?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've never really been a kind of person to have issues with introducing myself to people or, I think this person's doing something cool, so I'm going to reach out to them. I have no problem doing that. It is still interesting sitting down with someone that you have never either met in person or that you met very briefly but don't know a lot of background information about, especially when, like, Steve isn't here to help me with the interview because... like, if I know the person, then obviously I can pepper in random facts or, oh, yeah, you remember that time back in school? But without knowing the person, it's interesting to see how easy a conversation steers. A lot of people can have the disposition to just give one-liner answers, and then the interview's over in 15 minutes, and then I'm just, like, picking at my brain going, okay, what else can we talk about? I clearly did not do enough research on this person or whatever. But conversation's usually pretty easy, especially considering we're talking to people about what they love doing. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, whenever I sit down with people, I'm not usually interviewing them necessarily. I'm just trying to figure out what makes them tick, and then I'll give them the questions for them to answer.
Yeah.
And I don't really like small talk either anyway. So, but it's amazing. There's been a few conversations where at the end of it, we feel like we're best friends probably, like, man, we have all this stuff in common. I would have never thought that.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting on my end whenever I talk to people. And I mean, you guys are basically doing the same thing just with mics in front of you.
Yeah.
Have you had anybody who's a little intimidated or thrown off by the mics?
Yes.
Well, don't answer that.
It's been pretty good so far.
Yeah.
Obviously, sometimes, like, if it's obvious, we try to make it as kind of casual as possible, but it seems like when Chris puts his headphones on, people realize that, so things that I'm saying are now being listened to by people, which is kind of funny, but...
We try and sneak it in there, though. I try and hit record before they notice.
Hey, you did today. You're real sneaky.
Hey, I mean, it gets the conversation rolling.
No, you have to do all these tricks.
Yeah, you don't have to start with a really formal, like, Justin Watkins of Native KC here with us today. Like, it's just like...
That kind of triggers the one-liner answers, too, a lot of times.
Yeah.
You have those really formal intros.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's been the most rewarding part?
I mean, meeting the people has been great.
Yeah.
Expanding my network has been fantastic. It's funny when you meet someone for the podcast and then you see them then at every event and you're like, how long would I have known this person if this had started 10 years ago? And then also just, like, how cool it is to have people quote things from the show to us, or you say, like, they ask you what you do, and you say, oh, yeah, I run a podcast, and they're like, oh, yeah, I've heard of that. That's fantastic. Yeah. Like, just kind of, like, knowing that we're doing something that people are enjoying and connecting with has been really awesome.
Not to mention, just every single time, it's incredibly inspiring.
Yeah.
Just to hear either different perspectives or just stuff people have gone through, right, to become who they are today as a creative. And it's always been inspiring for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the background stories are fascinating.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. I love hearing like the origin stories, and especially like where things didn't go as imagined, or the odd ways that this kind of went this way, and then that made all the difference for them. Like, that thing was just sort of a joke, and that's how you were known by that thing, or And everybody's got them too, if you can get them to reveal them. Some people are more forthcoming with it than others.
What are yours?
I don't know. I'm sure I got plenty of them. Have you found that this show benefits other people? Like, they said, hey, I'm so glad you did this. Because, I mean, I've had a few of those. I'm wondering if you've had the same thing.
I've heard a couple of people say that. I don't... I guess I've been bad about following up, like, what that means for them. Like,
well, sometimes it happens and they don't tell you. You know what I mean? So for every person that tells you, there's probably a few people who have benefited somehow from it.
Yeah.
I would bet.
Do you ever interview students at all? Like, have you ever gone to...
I think you're the youngest person I've interviewed.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Weird. Cool.
I had one person who said... He goes, hey, I like who you're talking with. It seems like you got a decent variety. Can you get an age variety in there also? I'd like to hear what students have to say, and maybe someone who's in their 60s, 70s or whatever. I'm like, also. I would love to get a wide variety of opinions. That's actually one of the points that I haven't really communicated very well, but with the Native interviews, it's not meant to be this like Hall of Fame of Kansas City people. It's just, these are people I think are interesting, and hopefully you'll think are interesting. Maybe you can learn something from them. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to show you what the fabric of the Kansas City scene is for these disciplines, and show you, I think you can learn from anybody. Yeah. I think a student who's just starting still has things that you can learn from, even if it's something as simple as, I remember when I was there, and it forces you to reflect. I just think that hearing a variety of those opinions is important.
Yeah, and I also think, like, something that we talked about the last time we met or hung out was, like, you like to put in kind of those big names of the community to kind of help elevate some of the either not as well-known people or younger folks or whatever. And, like, I think that's amazing. Like, that's a really awesome way to make sure that happens, to make sure that, you know, kind of everyone's opinion is valued and, like, appreciated and listened to.
Yeah, the way I looked at it was the top people, they're interesting, but a lot of them we've heard from before. Sure. Right? So it's not really that original content from some of them, but we get a little bit of brand equity from it for the next person in line who may still be trying to figure things out, but they are doing this cool project. Yeah. Then that's interesting. And then my favorite people are, if I can figure out someone who, okay, you're not the face of this, but you're definitely maybe the brains behind this operation, or like part of the power behind the throne. Like, those are my favorite types of people. You know, they're not the top tier in their organization, but you know they're just super sharp and doing really good work. Those are my favorite ones to interview.
Who have some of those been?
Probably half of the names on there. It's hard to say specific names, but there's a lot of people who, you know, in their organization, they're not at the top of their org chart, but you know they're putting out really good work. Yeah. That's just standout work. Sure. So.
Cool. Do you think you're going to bring people from St. Louis to Kansas City? Like, do you...
I don't know how that's going to work. For the most part, I show up in their office a couple times a month. I work remotely for them as well. And I work closely with their CEO and help them on some of their new initiatives. And then when it makes sense, whenever clients are going to line up, then we'll, you know, kind of partner. And it'll be nice because where they stop and where I start, it's a really natural transition to go from search into content, or content need a little bit of search intelligence to inform that. Yeah. So we're still filling out exactly what this partnership could do for each other. Yeah. It's still early days.
And obviously it's still evolving. I mean, it's brand new. But do you have kind of not necessarily an end goal, but do you think you're still going to be doing native in this kind of format in 5-10 years?
For the interviews?
Well, I guess both, like the interviews and...
The interviews, whenever I started, I thought, I'll do this for a year. Maybe I'll do it for a year. And I had no idea even what it would look like at the end of the year. I just knew I'm going to start talking to people and just see how it goes. Sure. I thought, just like you, maybe people will say no and this is going to be really difficult. But I thought it was worth trying. And then it actually ended up kind of working pretty well. Yeah. So I got to the end of the year, I mentioned to a couple of people, like, hey, I don't know if I should stop or keep it going. And they're like, well, are you running out of people to talk to? I'm like, no, not even close. Right. I have a long list of people I'd like to talk to. They're like, well, just keep it going. By the way, you shouldn't stop. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not stopping. I enjoy it. It takes up time, but again, I've kind of orchestrated in a way where it doesn't take up it's not a huge time suck for me. It's literally like going to a conference year round, but I get to pick who I talk to. And then I see them at the coffee shops. Yeah. So it's kind of like what you said a while ago. It really makes Kansas City feel like a small town. Yeah. A really small town. Yeah. I mean, I can walk into Mildred's and see like 3 or 4 people who I've interviewed. I'm like, what's up, guys? You know.
I was in there one day and Mayor Sly James just came rolling in with his bodyguards. I'm just like, this is amazing.
I kind of want to interview Evan from Mildred's just because whenever I go in there, I just laugh at. I don't know. Every coffee shop's like that. You just see people, and people get used to it. These coffee shops are sort of like this. It's like this collision area in Kansas City. Kansas City, I think, has a collision problem in the fact that we're so spread out. Yeah. The density is so low, but these coffee shops are like those rare collision areas. Yeah. And I was interviewing a developer at Mildred's one day. I happened to run into a friend/client, and then ran into someone else on the way out the door. I'm like, man, I probably should just keep coming here. But
yeah, no kidding.
I wanted to ask him, like, do you realize like that's what this is? I mean, he has to know, but I just think that's interesting. I think Kansas City needs more of those and people to be aware of what those are.
That's a very interesting idea. Just kind of, you just sparked some ideas there for me. Like talking to all of the coffee shops in the area and getting their perspectives. Like if they're, I mean, obviously people have their favorite spots, but I hop around from shop to shop, just kind of depending on where I am that day. So it'd be interesting to see what their side of it.
Well, yeah, I walked into PT's the other day too, and again, I ran into 3 or 4 people, and it didn't used to be that way. It's just that as you start talking to more people, and part of the reason why I did this also is that the interview project was that MMGY doesn't have a big local presence. We do travel, so there aren't a whole lot of travel related clients here in Kansas City. So all of our emphasis in this agency has been essentially on the coast or anywhere other than Kansas City. We did work for Visit KC, which was really fun for us because we were super pumped that we actually got to work local for once. So I had done a lot of work in the industry and got to know people there, but those relationships are spread out. And I really wanted to feel like a part of Kansas City community again, and that was one of the reasons why I did the interviews. Was it forced me to get out of my office. It forced me out of this comfort zone that I've never really felt comfortable here, but even just like a hint of comfort scares the death out of me. Like I don't ever want to be comfortable. You know, I think you've probably heard other people say that. I definitely did not. So I feel like this will make me uncomfortable.
Yeah. I just lost my train of thought. You said something about, that was it. Haha. So in terms of Kansas City and your audience for the new native, do you envision doing more local work, or do you kind of just keep
That's a good
everything?
question. So I shouldn't be concerned about this, but part of me was a little concerned that this audience who's grown to like the interviews will say, wait, you're starting a company now with the same name? What are you selling out? I don't understand what you're doing. Are you going to keep doing these names? This seems too commercialized for me right now. I don't really like what you're doing. The bigger risk is I have clients who are not in Kansas City. Again, a lot of these clients are not going to be in Kansas City that I end up working with. They're going to come to my website and be like, what is your fascination with Kansas City and these people? Like that actually, if people ever, if I'm calling on a client, and let's just say in Chicago, and they come to my website and they're like, they do content, but it seems like they're just an interview thing. We don't want to work with them. Like that's very costly, right? I don't care. I'm gonna do both, and I'm gonna make a big deal about both of them. And if anybody outside of Kansas City wants to understand why, like this is a hobby. This is a project that we're doing, and we really enjoy it. So
So you guys are kind of the new shift of Native is kind of like the Daydream project from Brennan O'Shaughnessy at Oceans and Sea. Like they have their website, which is primarily to sell their merchandise and to get people excited, but Daydreams is just like their inspiration, their continuation of forming themselves.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it like that. It is similar. So so whenever they come, actually, if you go to the website right now, it says content really big and bold. It basically says we do strategy, we'll create it for you, and we'll do user experience, meaning we'll build the house that it all sits in, right? And then right below that is a bunch of smiling faces and says, here's some people in Kansas City that are really smart. Read what they have to say. And those are the 2 things basically that you see on the website.
Cool.
So the nice thing about redoing the website is I was able to actually do the site the way I kind of wanted to in the first place. So now you can see everybody visually, and that kind of helps. But before, again, I just wanted a really minimal website. I actually didn't think people would use the web that often at all. I thought Instagram and Twitter were much better places for people to interact with the content. So.
Yeah, that is interesting.
One of the things I've been busy with this past month is, again, trying to get all the processes and everything really ironed out. I'm not trying to take what I do to clients at this point. I want to make sure that I've got things fairly buttoned up. I've got the team put together. I've got the processes put together. I've got all the artifacts put together and deliverables. Because I want to make sure that when I introduce clients to Native that it's not chaotic. It's very kind of streamlined and things are working. One of the things I've been working on is putting a roster of talent together. So that's been a big part of what I've been doing is getting the process streamlined to where when clients come in, it's very It's very organized. It's not chaotic. Getting all the right people in order is another thing. So we'll have a few full-time employees soon, but right now we're going to rely on a lot of vendors and freelancers, which is nice because it gives you a lot of options. So if you want a writer who has this particular voice or knows a lot about this subject, if you have a deep roster of writers, you can kind of handpick the best ones.
Sure.
It really helps whenever you have a few who kind of really know your process and what the expectations are. So some partnerships are a little stronger than others and are going to be more preferred, right?
Yeah.
But for people listening, if there's freelancers, designers, writers, photographers, videographers, all that, we have a list of people for all of those. So actually, there's a place on the website that mentions, if you want to be a part of this or be one of those vendors in your portfolio, and we'll see if it fits with what we're doing. But again, it's about putting these plans together for clients to where the problem we're trying to solve is every organization has something to say, and most of them struggle to say it in a meaningful way.
Right.
Either it comes out flat, it doesn't mean anything to their audience, or maybe it's actually really good, they just know how to get it in front of their audience.
Right.
So we want to solve both of those. We want to make sure it gets in front of them, but it's very convincing and motivating and maybe speaks more about the audience more so than the client, right? So, we are, trying to form these partnerships with video companies and photographers and the best writers to where whenever we get a shot at it and they see the work that we're doing, they're like, oh yeah, like this represents us well.
Right.
Yeah.
So how will you handle a situation where, after a couple of years of doing this, a client comes to you and says, "Oh, we really like what you did for this team or organization or whatever," and then, if you have kind of a vision for that client in particular, and you think person A, B, and C will be best, but they really want person D, do you foresee that being an issue at all, or do you kind of think that people will primarily just kind of take your advice on things?
Oh, right. As far as being a matchmaker of who we think is the right talent for their brand.
Yeah, kind of you handpicking people versus them saying, I'd rather have A, B, and D just because I like their names.
Yeah. Well, that's not. That's pretty similar to how it's handled at any agency right now. If you ask any agency art director in town, and they'll talk about how do you recommend photographers for your shoot. It's kind of the same thing. You a lot of times you pick 3 photographers and show them their books, and you get estimates from them, and which one's hitting the kind of the price point, and which one's the style that you want, and make selections from there.
Cool.
So it's probably pretty similar to that.
Yeah. And you don't have a genre kind of selected, MMG.
As far as an industry.
Travel, yeah.
Yeah. Initially. There's 4 to 5 industries that I'm open to pursuing, I will be pursuing, and I've sort of prioritized those. And then from there, I'd like to take it down to 2 or 3.
Okay.
But I'm adaptable to the point where I want to know how the market's going to react to this. I think you have to do it that way.
Sure.
Architecture is one of the primary focuses. Architecture, real estate, construction. I have a decent background with real estate. Architecture is just way more exciting. No offense, real estate. Travel is something I've been done for the past 10 years, so I don't think I'll even have to make a big push on that. I think that things like that will just kind of fall to me.
Yeah.
And then with Evolve, they are very active in the telecom and healthcare industries, and so I think there'll be work that flows from that naturally.
Yeah. So those are 3. What are the other 2?
Well, those are probably the 4 primary ones, and there's potential that maybe restaurants, larger restaurant chains, not individuals, but the larger chains could potentially be something. But again, I'm mostly focused on architecture right now, and then also seeing how we can work with the telecoms with Evolve. But I think that's probably I think what we're talking about right now is probably what my next 3 to 6 months major focus will be.
Yeah. Do you have any clients lined up yet?
Yeah, there's a few that are coming in. So far we have sort of a couple mid-sized clients lined up, and then a couple monster accounts that are potentials.
Wow.
And they could easily flame up and do nothing, or they could come through, and I'm not going to mention them now, but this is one of the most exciting things about starting your own business is when you see that this could work, even if it doesn't work, even if it could work, it is so exciting.
Yeah.
there's 3 companies that have come out of nowhere that could potentially work with us that would be like game-changing companies, and all 3 could go nowhere, right?
Did they come to you or did you go to them?
All 3 were very unusual circumstances. So, and none of them I pursued. They it was just conversations led to this or that.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting when you see how that could happen.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't happen, it's really exciting.
Yeah.
Because eventually it's going to happen, It's just a matter of time.
Yeah. What is your real estate background?
Oh, I've done work, actually through MGY. I've done a few real estate projects. Every once in a while, we'll take on a client that has nothing to do with travel. We just have contacts, and it's good work, and we'll take it on.
Yeah.
And we had done a few there. And then on freelance, I know a handful of people in that industry, and they've asked for work over the years, and I've done that as well.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you have any events coming up that you want to talk about or things that you're involved in? Obviously, people need to keep an eye on the website.
Yeah, I think if you want to see the website or the new video that kind of explains everything, probably a little bit better than me right now, nativekc.com. And then knowing your audience, I would say that if there are freelancers and they would like to submit their portfolio and potentially be one of the vendors that we use, also go to NativeKC and you can find my contact information. And then the other thing I should mention is that MMGY is still a great place to work. So there's design internships open in the summer, and I think there's probably a couple open jobs right now on the website as well. Okay. So even though I may be walking out the door eventually, it's been really good for me over the past 10 years and would always highly recommend it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been an awesome episode. And we'll have to catch back up with you in 6 months or a year and kind of see how.
See if I'm still smiling.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, I appreciate it. I love what you guys are putting out, so keep it up.
Thanks. We like what you're doing as well.
Thanks.
That's why we're doing it.